What the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Stop and think. What if I told you many of the signs of wealth you've always sought are already written, encoded millennia ago in the pages of the Bible, and that in fact, if these signs begin to appear in your life, they indicate you're going to become rich? Have you noticed that in life, those who have clarity about where they want to go seem to have a different kind of energy? It's as if the universe, God, life itself, begins to align events to make that goal a reality. The Bible shows this repeatedly. Joseph, while still young, dreamt he would rule, and even though he was sold into slavery, unjustly imprisoned and forgotten for years, he kept that vision firmly in his mind. Nehemiah, when he heard about the destroyed walls of Jerusalem, didn't hesitate. He knew exactly what he needed to do. He prayed, planned, and faced all opposition. This is a sign of wealth that many ignore, having a clear vision and a defined purpose. Napoleon Hill, having studied thousands of successful people, came to the same conclusion. He said that clarity of purpose is the starting point of all achievement. But think with me, how many people do you know who spend their entire lives without knowing where they're going? They work at jobs they don't like, expend energy on activities that don't bring them closer to the future they desire, and when they look back, they realize they've spent years running in circles. Perhaps you yourself have felt this frustration. Isn't it frightening to think we could waste our entire lives because we never stopped to decide what our destiny would be? Clarity, however, isn't enough. You need unwavering belief. The Bible says that faith is the substance of things hoped for. Joseph not only had the dream, but he believed in it even when everything pointed to the contrary. And this is where the second layer of this sign emerges: unshakable faith. Many people give up halfway because they start to doubt, because they let fear take over. What if I fail? What if I'm embarrassed? What if it doesn't work out? But the question we should really be asking is, what if it does work out? What if everything you've ever wanted is already on its way, and the only thing you need is to keep believing? How does this work in practice? Imagine someone unhappy with their job, but with a dream of opening a small business. They write this vision in detail: what the product will be, how they want customers to feel, what impact they want to make. And even if the initial capital is small, they start little by little, believing they will grow. Another example. A student decides they want to be a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. While many get lost, they write down their goals. In 5 years, I will be graduated. In 10 years, I will be working in the field of my dreams. This clarity creates direction, and faith provides the fuel to keep them from giving up when difficulties arise. Napoleon Hill experienced this intensely. He was born into a very poor family. His mother died when he was only 9 years old, and he became a rebellious boy, lost, directionless, until his stepmother came into his life and, at a decisive moment, said, "Perhaps you are the smartest person in the world, and they simply don't know what to do with your intelligence." That phrase changed the course of his life. Suddenly, a boy who could have gotten lost found a vision to prove he could be great. That was the turning point. It wasn't a diploma. It wasn't an inheritance. It wasn't luck. It was a vision planted in his heart that he believed was possible. And from that moment on, Hill decided he would dedicate his life to understanding why some people succeed and others don't. Can you feel the weight of that? He could have become just another statistic of failure, but he chose to believe in something bigger. And how many times have you doubted yourself, thought about giving up, believed you weren't capable? Perhaps you haven't realized it, but when you begin to have clarity about where you want to go and start believing with all your might, that's already the first sign of wealth manifesting in your life. And if you think this is just a matter of faith without logic, know that modern research confirms the power of this practice. Studies in psychology show that people who have clear goals and visualize them daily have up to 42% more chances of achieving them than those who don't write them down or define anything. Our brain works like a radar. When you tell it exactly what you want, it starts to see opportunities that were previously invisible. Have you ever noticed how, when you decide to buy a car of a certain color, you suddenly start seeing that car everywhere? It's not a coincidence, it's focus. And here's a challenge for you. For the next 7 days, every morning, write down clearly what your vision is for your life. It doesn't have to be something grand, but something that makes sense to you. It could be your dream career, a business you want to start, or even the transformation you want to experience in your financial life. Read it aloud daily and observe what begins to change. If you do this for real, you will realize that your brain will start working in your favor, and this will be the most evident sign that the Bible and Napoleon Hill were right. Wealth begins in the mind, and if you already have this clarity, you are already on the way. There's a common thread in almost all success stories: perseverance. The Bible makes this clear when it speaks of Job, a man who lost everything but didn't give up his faith, and in the end was restored twofold. It's as if life was testing whether he was truly willing to continue even when everything seemed lost. And this is one of the greatest signs that wealth is on its way. When you insist, even when tired, even when discredited by others, even when nothing seems to be working out. Napoleon Hill, after interviewing thousands of people, realized that failure is rarely definitive. He said that most people give up just a few steps from victory. How many times doesn't this happen? Someone opens a business, faces the first difficult months, and closes its doors. A student starts a course, faces difficult subjects, and abandons it. A person tries to change their habits, loses motivation at the first setbacks, and goes back to square one. Perhaps you yourself have experienced this, giving up shortly before achieving something greater. What if your big breakthrough was exactly in the next attempt? What differentiates those who achieve wealth from those who remain stagnant is the ability to endure discomfort, pain, and even temporary failure without abandoning the path. The Bible teaches that the harvest comes to those who don't lose heart, and this applies to all areas of life: financial, emotional, spiritual. Imagine a farmer who plants and, in the middle of the season, decides to stop watering because they think it won't work out. They will never see the fruit of what they sowed. In practical life, this means continuing even when the results seem small. An entrepreneur who opens an online store and, in the first few months, sells little, but learns from their mistakes and improves every detail until they find loyal customers. A professional who tries for job openings and receives several rejections, but continues to improve their skills, adjusting their resume, until finally being called for the right opportunity. The problem is that most people want quick results. When they don't come, fear arises. What if I never succeed? What if I'm wasting my time? What if I regret it later? But the right question is, are you willing to pay the price of never truly trying? Napoleon Hill lived this firsthand. He spent more than 20 years studying the greatest names of success of his time, interviewing hundreds of millionaires, gathering thousands of pages of notes, facing criticism and discredit. Imagine the perseverance needed to invest 2 decades in a project that no one knew if it would bear fruit. Many called him a dreamer or even crazy. But he didn't give up. And if he had stopped halfway, the world would never have known the law of success or Think and Grow Rich, works that changed the mindset of millions of people. This determination is living proof that perseverance is the soil where wealth flourishes. Henry Ford, one of the examples Hill studied, also shows this clearly. Before creating the Ford Motor Company, he faced several bankruptcies, criticism from investors, and even ridicule from the press. But he persisted. Perseverance led him to become one of the greatest names in the world industry. Now think of the opposite. How many promising projects have you heard of that simply disappeared because their founders didn't have the stamina to continue? Failure didn't come because the idea was bad, but because perseverance was lacking, and science confirms what the Bible and Hill already stated. Angela Duckworth, a researcher at the University of Pennsylvania, studied what differentiates top students, soldiers, and professionals from others, and coined the term grit, which means precisely perseverance. Her conclusion was clear. Talent and intelligence are important, but the decisive factor is the ability to persist for years in a goal, even in the face of difficulties. People with this trait not only have more financial success, but also more well-being and satisfaction with life. This leads us to an important reflection. Have you been giving up too soon? How many times have you stopped continuing because the results weren't immediate? Was the sign of wealth already before you and you didn't notice? If you feel you are facing trials, obstacles, and that everything conspires against you, perhaps it is not the end, but proof that you are closer than you imagine. And if you remain, if you continue, victory will come. This is the second sign. The perseverance that transforms pain into strength, failure into learning, and resistance into wealth. One of the most powerful signs that wealth is approaching is when you begin to attract or seek people who think like you and share the same values and goals. The Bible already said that iron sharpens iron, showing that no one grows alone. Even Jesus, who could do everything alone, chose to be surrounded by 12 disciples, showing the value of community and partnership. Napoleon Hill called this mastermind, the union of two or more people in perfect harmony, working together for a common purpose. This principle is so strong that Hill claimed that one mind alone can achieve results, but two connected minds create a third intelligence, more powerful than the sum of the two. Now think about your life. How many times have you isolated yourself for fear of being judged or remained surrounded by negative people who didn't believe in your dreams? This is one of the greatest thieves of prosperity. Because even without realizing it, you end up absorbing the pessimism, disbelief, and limitations of others. It's like trying to row against the current. On the other hand, when you connect with people who believe in growth, everything changes. Ideas emerge, opportunities appear, doors open. Ask yourself, could the lack of support be precisely what's keeping you trapped? Practical examples show this clearly. Think of someone who dreams of opening a business. If they only talk to people who constantly complain about the economy, they give up before they even start. But if they join a group of entrepreneurs, even small ones, who exchange tips, strategies, and motivation, the chance of prospering increases dramatically. Or a student who wants a promising career. If they are surrounded by classmates who only think about giving up, they will hardly have the incentive to continue. But finding a group of friends who share the same ambition and support each other, each achievement becomes fuel for everyone else. Napoleon Hill experienced this firsthand. He had access to men like Andrew Carnegie, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and Alexander Graham Bell. Interviewing and spending time with these individuals, he realized they all had something in common. They didn't walk alone. They built support circles, discussed ideas, sought advice, and formed true networks of growth. Hill understood this principle was universal. He himself was a product of it. The opportunity to converse with Andrew Carnegie opened a door that transformed his life and gave him the mission to record the secrets of success. Without that network, Hill might never have written his works, and millions wouldn't have been impacted by his teachings. Consider other great examples from history. Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, relied on the support of collaborators and a fertile environment of ideas to turn his vision into reality. This shows that even geniuses need a support network. On the other hand, How many talented people have you seen who, through self-isolation, ended up wasted? How many projects die, not for lack of ability, but for lack of support and strategic partnerships? Modern science confirms the importance of this principle. Studies on social networks and psychology show that humans are profoundly influenced by their environment. Spending time with motivated, entrepreneurial, and positive people exponentially increases the likelihood of you adopting those behaviors. Conversely, living in toxic and pessimistic environments increases your stress and anxiety levels and even reduces your life expectancy. In other words, your network doesn't just affect your finances, but also your health and happiness. The sign of wealth here is clear. When you realize you're no longer trying alone, when you start seeking or attracting people who strengthen your vision and share the same values, you're already living the principle of the mastermind. This is proof that the ground is prepared for prosperity. You may not have achieved everything you want yet, but if you already feel the need to connect with others, to share ideas, to seek inspiration from people greater than yourself, it means your mind has already understood that wealth is never the work of an isolated individual, but of a collective that grows together. The Bible shows that true prosperity is never separate from integrity, generosity, and gratitude. These three pillars form an unmistakable sign that wealth is on its way, because they align the mind, heart, and actions with principles that sustain lasting success. Napoleon Hill realized this when he studied hundreds of wealthy people. It wasn't enough to just have ambition and discipline. You needed solid values to keep wealth standing, like the columns of a temple. Generosity is one of those columns. There's something powerful in the act of giving that seems to defy logic. The more you give, the more you have. Modern science confirms this. A study published in the journal Science in 2008 showed that people who spend money helping others report higher levels of happiness than those who spend only on themselves. It's as if prosperity is multiplied when it's not withheld. The Bible taught this centuries ago. There is one who scatters, yet increases more, and there is one who withholds more than is meet, but it tends to poverty. True abundance is not just accumulation, but flow. When you are generous, you connect to that flow. Integrity is another pillar. Without it, any wealth is like a house built on sand. Bernie Madoff, for example, was considered a financial genius, but he built his fortune on deception and fraud. Result, he lost everything, was imprisoned, and destroyed thousands of lives in the process. This is the perfect example of how a lack of integrity not only blocks true prosperity, but also transforms wealth into a curse. On the other hand, names like Warren Buffett show the opposite. Recognized as one of the richest men in the world, Buffett built his reputation around trust, transparency, and decisions based on ethical principles. His fortune came not only from financial intelligence, but from the credibility earned over time. Gratitude is the third sign that confirms you're ready to prosper. Being grateful not only for great victories, but also for small advances, creates a mental atmosphere of abundance. Research by Robert Emmons and Michael McCullough has shown that people who practice gratitude regularly sleep better, have more energy, and feel more optimistic about the future. In other words, gratitude creates the perfect emotional ground for wealth to flourish. Napoleon Hill also knew this. In his works, he stated that cultivating a positive and grateful mindset was not just a spiritual habit, but a practical requirement for attracting opportunities and allies. Think about your own life. How many times have you focused more on what you lacked than on what you already had? This habit of complaining and focusing on needs is like closing the doors to new blessings. But when you begin to give thanks, even for difficulties, something changes within you. Your perception transforms. What was once an obstacle becomes a lesson. What seemed little becomes enough, and what has not yet arrived begins to be lived within your mind. This attitude is magnetic. Grateful people attract more support, more trust, and more opportunities because no one resists approaching someone who transmits this energy. Generosity opens doors. Integrity keeps those doors open. And gratitude attracts even more paths. When these three signs are present, they indicate that you will not only have wealth, but also have the structure to sustain it. After all, there is no worse failure than achieving a great deal and losing everything for lack of the right foundation. That's why the Bible insists so much on these principles, and that's why Napoleon Hill considered them an essential part of any philosophy of success. If today you feel the urge to share more, to live with more transparency, and to be thankful even for things you once despised, this is a clear sign that your mind is already in tune with prosperity. No matter your current condition, when these three elements begin to sprout within you, it means that wealth has already found space to be born. There's a sign of wealth that often goes unnoticed, but it's as powerful as the previous ones: the ability to transform adversity into stepping stones. The Bible is full of examples of people who went through the greatest trials and, instead of being discouraged, used difficulties as tools for growth. Paul, unjustly imprisoned, wrote letters that still inspire millions of people. David, before becoming king, was persecuted, humiliated, and had to hide in caves. But it was precisely during this period that he developed the courage and faith that made him a leader. This biblical pattern teaches us that when adversity appears, it is not a sign of the end, but of preparation for something greater. If today you feel you are going through trials, difficulties, or crises that seem unbearable, know that this may be exactly the sign that your life is being prepared for prosperity, because wealth is not just accumulating money, but developing the inner strength needed to sustain it when it comes. Pain, in this context, is not punishment, but training. And here's a challenge. Choose a difficulty you are facing now, and for the next 7 days, write down daily what hidden opportunities may be within it. It could be a lesson, a change of course, a skill that needs to be developed. By the end of that week, you will not only have a new vision of your pain, but you may discover that it is exactly the step you needed for your wealth. This is another biblical and universal sign of prosperity. When you begin to realize that adversity is not an end, but an invitation to level up. True wealth doesn't begin in the bank account, but within the mind and heart of those who believe, act, and persist. If you understand this, you are already one step ahead of most. And to not interrupt this journey, the next video appearing on your screen will help you climb another step in your wisdom evolution, making you 1% better than you are now. Thank you very much for being here with me, and I'll see you in the next video.